Welcome to our online chat, Tales of Bricks and Mortar, part of Glen Ira's live Sunday session series. I'm Ellie Credlin, History and Heritage Officer at the City of Glen Ira. Before we go any further, as we gather today for this conversation, physically dispersed but virtually together, I acknowledge the traditional lands on which we all meet today and the traditional custodians of those lands. I pay my respects to all elders, past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal people and their ongoing culture and connection to the lands and waters of Victoria. Thank you so much for joining us today on a rather dreary and cold Melbourne winter's day. I hope wherever you're joining us from, you're rugged up, you've got a cup of something very hot, and you'll enjoy the next little while with us. Today, I am joined by Aaron Lewin, writer, journalist, and the man behind the Tales of Bricks and Mortar project, a website which tells stories about long-standing shops, cafes and restaurants loved by people all around Melbourne, many of them in Glen Ira. Local shopkeepers and traders invite Aaron and his photographic partner Tatiana into their stores, sharing their stories, their memories and their histories. Carolyn Webb, a journalist for The Age, wrote about Aaron a couple of years ago in an article that he's literally the man who goes shopping for stories. And I think that that's a pretty apt description for what Aaron does. We're also joined by Tatiana Scott, the extremely talented photographer behind some of the magnificent imagery you see on the beautiful Tales website, which I'll encourage you all to visit after today. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much.
Together, Aaron and Tatiana tell these stories as a creative partnership of sorts. So Aaron with his words and his pen, and Tatiana with her camera. There are now nearly 60 stores, I think, Aaron, is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's about 60.
Nearly 60. From tailors, cafes, restaurants, bakeries, button shops, even the donut van at the Danny Market gets to go, and haven't we all had a donut from the Danny Market? So today is a conversation about some of those more local stories, sort of particular to Glen Ira, the shops and identities behind them. I also want to know why Aaron and Tatiana do what they do, what inspires them, and also how they get these traders and these shopkeepers to open up their doors and invite them in and share their stories. So, and in the midst of COVID and the real resurgence of the local that I've seen, I think this is a really important and timely conversation to be having. So a bit of housekeeping. We've got a chat function on YouTube. Chat amongst yourselves on there, share some memories. What shops do you wish were still there but aren't? What shops are still there and that maybe Aaron and Tatiana could next visit as part of the Tales project. Chat amongst there. We've got set aside some time at the end to bring you all into the chat. So please drop us a line there and we'll get to as many of those comments and questions as we can. So I think we'll get going. Aaron, I'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about the Tales of Bricks and Mortar project, how it came about, what inspired it, and how did it start?
Sure. So so I started Tales of Brick and Mortar, I think in 2017. I just finished my journalism degree, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I think at the time when I was sort of thinking about it, I was reading a book that it was called Fitzroy the biography, and it was a series of, I guess, stories and poems about the people and the characters and sort of the urban history of that area. I guess I was thinking about the fact that there are all these sort of seemingly permanent shops that are around me, and they've got, they feel like they've been there forever, and I sort of know the people behind them, and, they're such a critical part of the community. And I guess, hypothetically they might close, and then if they do close and nobody's sort of writing these stories, then they sort of disappear, and those stories, it's so much more difficult to sort of capture these stories. So I was thinking about that, and then I guess beyond that, so many of them go through different generations. So there's a second generation and a third generation, and then, at some point somebody may have to make a decision whether they want to, pursue their own passions or whether they want to continue, the history of this shop. So I was thinking about all these things. And I remember at the time I was walking past a picket manufacturer on Glen Huntly Road, I think, and wondering, how do you even start this sort of line of business? Where do you develop these skills? What's the impetus behind doing it? How do you get to the position where you're going to start manufacturing sort of picket fences? So I went to them and asked them if they wanted to have a chat about, I guess, their business and the history behind their business. And they weren't interested at the time, but I think down the road, Ben Howe Butcher on Glen Huntly Road. It was their final week of trading. And yeah, he was more than happy to have a chat about, I guess, you know, the trade and his sort of shop and, you know, the industry. And yeah, it sort of went from there. You know, that story was, you know, enjoyed by family and friends and things. So, you know, I interviewed the local bookshop, Out of Print Books, ETC, which is on the other side of Glen Huntly Road, my local barber, Cruising Cuts. And yeah, it sort of went from there.
Rolled, snowballed.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you started with Ben Howe was one of the first interviews.
Yeah, that was the first. That was the first one. Yeah.
If anyone remembers Ben Howe, please drop us a line on the chat as well. And Tatiana, when did you come on board?
It was in 2017 as well. I actually heard Aaron on Triple R while I was driving, and he talked about the project and the stories that he was writing, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. So when I got home, I Googled and found the website, and I read the stories, and I thought, oh, this is just really interesting, beautiful stories. But I felt that the images that were in the stories didn't really reflect what was written very well. So I'm a professional photographer, so I thought, oh, I can do better. So I actually just emailed him and I said, you know, I think the project is great and I think I could really bring another element to the stories and translate what you wrote into a visual storytelling and present the story together with the words and the images.
Well, they do say a picture tells 1,000 words. And I'm sure that, Aaron, that was a very welcome email.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you can sort of, it's quite funny going through the website where you can see I think I did the first 10 stories, which is just me on my sort of phone. And the photos really, yeah, they're really average photos. So there's a very, no, it's fine. There's a very dramatic difference between the 10th story and the 11th story. You can see it's very, you know, noticeable when sort of Tatiana comes on board.
It's a beautiful creative partnership you've got going. It's really quite something special. So, Aaron, what's the process when you're selecting a store? What's the criteria to get on the Tales website?
So I guess it's a bit arbitrary. There's no like specific sort of date. So it's long-standing shops, but there's not like, you know, you have to be around since 1982 sort of thing, because I mean, sometimes it's the one owner who's been around for a long time. Sometimes it's the shop that's been around for a long time, but the owners might be new. So yeah, there's no, I guess, set criteria. A lot of the time in terms of finding the shop, it's particularly in the initial stages, it was just sort of walking down a particular street, I guess, particularly around Glen Ira. And yeah, it might look interesting. It might, you know, seem to have a long history, but that can also sort of be precarious, because sometimes the shop front might look like it's been around for a long time, but it's not necessarily the case. It might have been a shop that I, you know, was familiar with, where I, you know, knew the shop owner and had been, you know, in and around, you know, throughout my upbringing. Often it's a recommendation from somebody about a shop that's been around. I guess throughout the years, it's been more recommendations from people that I've sort of followed. And yeah, definitely across different areas. So during the initial stages, it was mainly around Caulfield, and now it's sort of all over, I guess, particularly in Melbourne. But yeah. So no set criteria, just
no set criteria. Yeah. So question for both of you, and I'll start again with you, Aaron. Do you find you have to do, I know you work together, so I'm interested also in the process of how you work together when you visit a store. Do you find you have to do a bit of work to get these traders and shopkeepers to open up to you, to share their stories? And we'll talk about with you, Aaron, from I guess a interviewing them perspective, and then Tatiana, how you do it with your camera. Aaron?
Sure. So I guess it definitely depends on the personality. So there are certain, you know, shopkeepers and traders who are really sort of, really keen to have a chat, really eager to tell their story, you know, and then there are others who are a bit more reserved, who, you know, take a bit of time. So often during the, initial stages, it's just sort of, I guess just going through a process of sort of getting them to open up. And then definitely throughout sort of the interview, you can see more and more information sort of coming out about them, about, I guess, their reflections on the industry and about the shop and the street and the community. So it's definitely a process. I guess there aren't sort of specific questions that I sort of ask that get people to open up, but I guess it's just figuring out the different personalities and sort of, I guess what they respond to, I suppose.
And I guess also the pride in that someone's interested in their story and the shop that they've built and the trade that they've built over the years, that must be quite nice, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like just walking around, I guess now that I've started doing this, you often see, you know, on the top of the shop, it'll say, you know, established 1980, established 1975, and you know, stuff like that. And there is that sort of, you know, bursting pride from a lot of these people that they're really eager to tell their story, but I guess in a lot of cases they haven't really been asked in, I guess, you know, by a writer, I suppose.
You must walk down the street and just be looking for those established signs everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Something I never noticed until I sort of started doing this,
I'm
and now
noticing it.
you see them everywhere.
Yeah. And Tatiana, I guess, is it as difficult, I guess, to get people to open up with the camera? What's sort of your approach in making people comfortable?
Yeah, so I don't do just the photos. I participate during the interview process as well. So they get used to me, and I ask questions, and I think by the time that I actually grab my camera, they are quite relaxed with me, and I think what you mentioned, it's what I feel a lot of times, that a lot of times I find that would be the first time that someone is actually interested in their story. So at the beginning, they are quite reserved and not sure, and just very shy. But as they can see during the process that Erin and we're getting excited and we are really interested, and these stories are always fascinating, and maybe it's the first time they are telling it.
Wonderful. So I'll start with you, Erin. What's your favorite story that you've recorded so far out of the nearly 60 that are on the website?
I think my favorite is, I guess it was before I was working with Tatiana, of Divine Deli, which was just at the end of the street that I sort of grew up in on Glen Ira Road. And I think it was particularly because it was something where, particularly Hassan, I'd sort of known him for so many years. I've been going and getting schnitzel sandwiches from there for so many years. And yeah, it was really fascinating learning about his story, but then also the response to that story about how that shop is such a pillar of the community, and how so many people had grown up, going there, and had so many people had, just been shopping there for years and years and know the family. And I guess the response to that, and also, the appreciation for that story. And I think that's probably my favorite, just because there was a real feeling throughout the interview, and then also following the story. It was, really
and
lovely.
Tatiana, what about you? What's been your favorite so far?
I can't tell that I have a favorite. I think for me, I'm a visual person, every shop had something really interesting to me besides the story of the shop. I love tools and skills, and anything that is handmade, and the bread, and a watchmaker or shoe repair. I want to look at everything, and you can see in their hands they trade, the tailors, and I'm just fascinated with everything. So it's like a little kid in a lolly shop when I go to those shops.
That's so wonderful.
I don't think I have a favorite, but I do love the stories where the shop, it's in the third generation, maybe like a few generations going through the family, and how the younger generation are trying to update, put social media and try to make the shop keep going, which is interesting to see that transition from, the person that started the shop to, the grandchildren trying to put the shop out there in the social media.
Wonderful. And I guess that's the big question, is there a next generation for a lot of these traders and shopkeepers? That's one of the big questions, I guess. Yeah. What I find really lovely about Tales is that it captures so beautifully this mosaic, or this patchwork quilt, I guess, of the diverse array of cultural influences that make up our beautiful town. European delis in South Melbourne Market, Lebanese bakeries in Brunswick, Middle Eastern bakeries in Dandenong, Italian tailors in the middle of the city, Chinese and Vietnamese restaurants in Springvale. It's such a mosaic. Aaron, I'll start with you. Was that intentional to capture that diversity, or was it just to happen organically because it was a reflection of what you were seeing?
No, I think it was something I was, I'm trying to be conscious of. I wanted the, Tales of Brick and Mortar to sort of reflect, I guess Melbourne in general, and sort of when the urban landscape of Melbourne. I think if I'd, during the initial stages, particularly in sort of Caulfield, I think it would have been, I guess it reflected, my upbringing and my surroundings. But I, try to make an effort to, I guess explore more of Melbourne and reflect more of that, I guess, that diversity, that cultural diversity.
Yeah.
And it's something that I'm still, working towards and trying to get better at it, finding all these different shops. But yeah, it's definitely something that I've tried to be conscious of.
I think when you look at the website sort of collectively, you can see it, and even the way the website is built and visually how it is like a patchwork quilt. I don't know whether that was intentional, but it's beautifully presented.
Oh, no, that's great. Yeah, it's good to hear.
Well, if you meant to do that, well done. So sort of leading on from that, I guess there's a lot of stories on the website about the post-war migrant experience as well. Frank, for instance, Frank's Bakery, who we'll talk a little bit about later, and Ramoni Taylor in the city, who's been around forever. Sort of that idea of coming to Australia, finding or bringing a trade with you, building a life around it with a brick and mortar shop, and kind of speaks to, I guess, the optimism of Australia at that time. And that it was a good place to come, and that it was a place that you could build success and build a life. That's, to me, a really interesting thing. I know that Frank, in your interview with Frank, he talks about when he came to Australia, it was just white bread everywhere, and he was horrified. And he made it his mission to bring rye bread to Elsternwick. And I remember my father the other day, actually, when I told him I was doing this, and he grew up a little bit in Elsternwick in his sort of 20s, and he said, oh yeah, Frank's rye bread. It was the first time he tried rye bread at Frank's Bakery in Elsternwick. So that's just a real comment, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it speaks to that post-war experience. Was that something that you were looking to capture?
So not necessarily. Something I guess I've been thinking more about recently is this idea that I think at a particular point in time, you could sort of, I don't know if it was easy or not, but it seemed, I think, more common that you could, reach a point where you could open a shop, where you could become a tailor or become a shoe repair. Well, I think, I guess maybe from my generation, I suppose, I don't know if that possibility is there. A lot of the jobs are sort of office-based or, I think it's kind of incomprehensible to me that, as a 20-year-old, you could sort of open your own shop and sort of, and then that shop will be around for 100 years. That's sort of unimaginable to me. Like that idea that I could, end up creating a picket fence, that sort of thing is just impossible for me to comprehend. So definitely part of that, so it wasn't something I was sort of targeting or trying to focus on, was that sort of post-war experience, but definitely the idea that like that possibility might not necessarily, be, to the extent as it is now.
And as we were talking about earlier about who are the next generation to even not only starting a new shop, but taking on the family business is quite a scary proposition, I think, for some of the next generation, because it is such a, I guess, a volatile environment, that kind of brick and mortar high street shop. So
yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
I was going to say, I met with a lot of these stories. There's, a point where you're speaking to the second or third generation, there's that decision where they sort of follow their own interests, or they, they have the weight of that business sort of, and they have to decide what they're going to do. And I imagine the question of that would be, yeah, exactly.
What I also really love about this website is you don't just talk about the individual traders and the shopkeepers, but these traders, they talk about the community that they're in, that kind of retail community, whether it be a shopping strip like Glen Huntly Road, Elsternwick, or Koonang Road, Carnegie. It's really interesting how so many of the traders talk about their trading neighbours or the strip that they are in, and they talk about it in this term as, terms of community. Did that come across to you as strongly as you were collecting these stories, as it does when you look at them collectively on the website?
I think, I guess the focus of this was to say that, there's so much more to these shops than, I guess, the transaction of sort of goods and services. I mean, particularly from a historical perspective, they can see sort of that change that's happening to the street and their community literally through their shop window. So if you want to get a sense of history, the best person to talk to might be that shopkeeper who's sort of seen it all. And the spirit of that community, although I guess it's changing, I think the one thing that's consistent, a thread line throughout all the stories is how passionate they are about the community and like the area they live in and the people that they sort of you know, whether it's their neighbors, their traders or their customers who, you know, so often they'll say that, you know, they dealt with a customer for 20 years and then they had a kid, and then they'll deal with that customer, you know, for another 20 years, and then they'll have a kid, and then they'll see that third generation of customers come through, which is, yeah, it's amazing. I'm not sure if that's sort of reflected in sort of, you know, bigger shopping chains and that sort of thing. I think it's quite unique to those sort of small shops.
And remember, guys, on the chat line, please send us all your thoughts about shops that you wish were still around but aren't, and shops that are around that you hope don't ever go. Briefly, I want to talk about this concept of nostalgia. Now, I had you, Aaron, on a panel last year as part of the Glenara Storytelling Festival, and it was about nostalgia as it relates to our suburban life. And we've talked about this a little bit since. Are you in the nostalgia game, or is what you're doing something very different to that?
I think it's something that, I think with, like the idea, I guess, is to show how relevant all these shops still are and how critical they still are to so many people. So I think for me, I don't know how accurate this is, but for me, the idea of nostalgia is something that isn't necessarily so relevant anymore. It's something that we're wishing, that people are sort of wishing to go back to, you know, this time where something was really prevalent and now it's not so much prevalent, and we sort of miss that experience. And I think with some cases, like obviously the video shop, you know, that's probably, you know, there's nostalgia because that doesn't exist so much. But with, you know, shoe repairs and sort of bakers and, you know, butchers and things, they're so relevant now, and the focus is to say, you know, these people do such important work, they, you know, they're so critical still. So I don't necessarily think that's nostalgic. It's, you know, right in the moment, and it's something that you sort of actively have to preserve. I guess if, you know, once they close, then, you know, then it's maybe nostalgic about what they offered rather than what they're kind of currently offering.
Because we've still got a role to play here. So, you know, I think there's a romanticized idea about, things that have gone. But let's not, you know, I think the goal here is, well, let's not make these places about nostalgia, and let's keep them active and open. I think we'll talk a little bit specifically now about a few local faves. Leo, we might start with Frank's if we could. Frank's Bakery in Elstonwick. Now, everyone, I'd like share us memories of Frank's. Now, I think Frank may have closed his doors, and I'm not sure if or when he's reopening. If someone could confirm that in the chat, that would be great. But Frank's Bakery, so Frank's is an institution in Glen Huntly. The story goes that Frank came out to Australia in 1959, didn't speak a word of English, had £2 in his pocket, and some of his ancient sourdough culture, which he still uses today. He then opened his bakery in 1968, and so many people have a story about Frank and his delicious, delicious bread. Can you tell me a little bit about a time with Frank? He's such a character. I'll start with you. I'll just start with you, Tatiana. How did you find Frank to photograph and to talk to?
He was great. He had just this really open kind of personality. Was actually the first work that I did with Aaron, was Frank Bakery. So we are still trying to, so as the first work, we were not sure how we were going to work together. So this story specifically, I just photographed. So I was really in the background, just doing the photos while Aaron did the interview, which we changed a little bit over time to adjust for both of us to be a bit more comfortable. I think Aaron was not used to have someone around him with a camera, and so that was probably something interesting for him, this first work. But yeah, he was just a very welcoming, just beautiful smile, just excited about telling his story. And as a first story that I did, I just loved it. I had so much fun. And I could do that all day. I was just like, oh, I love it.
You can see it in his face, the joy of making bread. And Aaron, how did you find Frank?
Yeah, great. I mean, the one thing that sort of sticks in my mind is that big bucket of sort of sourdough that he'd had for 500 years, that he sort of came, I mean, the story was that it sort of came in his pocket from Germany, and he sort of grew it from there. But yeah, really, as Tatiana was mentioning, it was the first project we sort of worked together, and so much sort of navigating, you know, it's quite a small space to have three people sort of, you know, doing this sort of photo shoot and the interview at the same time. So a lot of it was navigating that. But I guess, I guess the memory was just that it was a really joyful experience. And yeah, throughout the interview as well, he kept offering, you know, every time we talk about a product, he'd offer us, you know, try this pretzel, try this bread, you know, and yeah, just very warm. It's, yeah, really great.
I love the board at the back with all the fake bread pinned on it. Such a beautiful, beautiful site. All right, we might move on now to Ara's Shoe Repairs in Glen Huntly. So that's been there since the early 1980s. And you talked earlier, Tatiana, about loving visually exploring and photographing places like this. So how did you find Ara's to photograph and to talk to him?
It was fantastic. He has nothing changed, I think, inside the shop for the whole time that he has been trading. So I think for us, this specific story was really interesting because we really had to get his trust. I believe that he just wasn't sure why would anyone be interested in his story, and it took a little bit of time until he realized that we are like, really? And then what happened? And then slowly he got, excited, and then the interview actually flowed really, really well. And yeah, that was really, really good. I love that story. And I actually went back to the shop when they had the 40th celebration. So the shop has been trading for 40 years. It's amazing.
42 years.
So I came back for the celebration and met his daughters, and yeah, that was great.
And I think in the interview, he says he makes sure he wears really good shoes because he's on his feet all day. So he spends up big on his shoes. And Aaron, how did you find Ara's?
Yeah, just to sort of reiterate, what Tatiana was saying. It took a while for him to sort of warm up. It can be sort of difficult to explain, what we're doing and why we're doing it, and come across as sort of legitimate and genuinely interested in their story. So it was a case of, he was very reserved, and it was a process of him sort of warming up and eventually telling the story. And then it was really great because I guess the story was really appreciated, after it was published by him and his family. I think one thing that was quite interesting about that story was I think he was initially an orthopedic shoemaker, and I don't think so I think a lot of the shop owners really romanticized the trade, but for him it was, it's really hard work, and so a lot of it was talking about his passions outside of, working as a shoe repair. So his love of cooking and that sort of thing, and I think it's a real sort of privilege to see the workspace and all the machinery and just how difficult the work is, and how skillful and how sort of talented,
how much skill is involved.
Yeah, for sure, and
definitely. Definitely. Well, we're going to move on now to Hatham's Men's. Oh, and that's the cookies they were giving out at their birthday, 40 years. Yum, yum. We're going to move on now to Hatham's Menswear in Glen Huntly Road, Elstonwick. So Hatham's is a bit of an institution that's been around for a long time. It's been in the same family since 1879, if you can believe that. Hasn't left the Hatham family. And Ian, in his interview, talks a lot about the changing nature, I guess, of service in retail, and that when he started at the store, you served customers, and that doesn't really happen anymore. People are generally like, I'm just looking and I'll try this on myself. And they've also got the cash railway system. Did you enjoy photographing that, Tatiana? A cash railway system is an old piece of technology where the cashier would send money to how did it work? Cashier would send money across the store, so they didn't have to walk across the length of the store to exchange money. And that's still there in the store. What was it like photographing Hatham's?
I did a little video, I think, of that. Yeah. So it's the shopkeeper that would put the money inside and send it to the cashier, and then it would come back with change.
Yeah.
And they said that they were just too lazy to pull it down. It was still there.
But now it's a kind of a talking point and something that they're quite proud of in the store, even though they were just too lazy to pull it down when it went out of vogue. We might actually move on because we're running out of. This has gone super quick, and we could talk about this forever. But we might move on to Video Busters, and there's Ian Hatham with the cash railway system there. Lampson. We might move on to Video Busters in Caulfield South. Now that closed in 2018, and it's now a gym, I believe, just near the corner of Hawthorne Road and Glen Huntly Road. Now, as a child of the 80s, I despair at the closure of video stores, but it's a reality, unfortunately, with all the streaming. Aaron, what was it like speaking with Hoven, knowing the time on Video Busters was up when you spoke to him? He was about to close, I believe, when you interviewed him.
Yeah, it was very bittersweet. So Video Busters as well for me was sort of a fixture of my childhood. I sort of always remember that Video Busters had, I guess, a more interesting selection of Blockbusters, which is down the road, had the newer, and yeah, the newer. So it was always a debate which one I sort of, used to go to. But yeah, it was because he was so, I mean, it was his dream job. I mean, that was my impression of the discussion, was that, he'd had it for years and years and years. And it was, I think he would watch the movies, and then, he would be, when people said, what do you want to watch? It was, he was sort of the person, who was just, who gave the recommendations that were really valued by customers. So it was really interesting, and he watched, thousands of movies over the years, and yeah, he was really passionate about it. But the thing that he sort of mentioned, that, two things that he sort of discussed, which I hadn't really thought about. One was, I guess, with streaming services, everybody's sort of watching the same content, while with, a video shop, you sort of go and you pick something at random and then you'll just watch it. So there's, yeah, I guess a real homogenization of what everybody was watching, is currently watching now. And I guess the other thing was accessibility as well, where things like Netflix, and you need to have some sort of technological sort of literacy. So a lot of people sort of miss out on that content. While with a video store, yeah, you could just go and pick something, and as long as you could work a VCR or a DVD player, you could play it. So those two points have sort of really stuck with me, and that doesn't really exist anymore, which is, I guess, a real shame.
I got a stat in preparation for today that in 2001 there was 2,600 video stores in Australia. And now, if anyone knows whether there are any left that anyone's aware of, please pop it in the chat function, because I'd be most curious to know. I know the last Blockbuster closed last year, but they're certainly a dying breed. So that was a really important one to capture, I think, Aaron, locally.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was such an important part of my childhood, I guess, and not even upbringing, that it was, yeah, I think the ones where I sort of have experience going in and sort of grew up around, those are the ones that are my favorite.
Yeah. Because I think we're at a sort of similar age, so the video store is definitely a part of our upbringing. And our last store that we're going to talk about today is Blight's. Now, Tatiana didn't photograph this because she wasn't born yet. This was taken in 1932. This is Samuel Blight, who opened up Blight's Shoe Repairs and Tobacconist in 1932 with shop assistant Edna Shears. Blight's claim to fame was a system of coating leather soles in paraffin wax to make them long-lasting and waterproof, and he had a contract with the Australian Army. Now, the shop has hardly changed, I believe, so a manual ledger is kept every day. Tickets are still handwritten, and it's also been in the family since 1932, and now run by, I believe, Jane, who's Samuel's granddaughter. So again, Tatiana, this would have been a beautiful shop to photograph because of all the tools. And I think that they still use Samuel's original hammer in their trade. So a hammer that's been in use since 1932. And this is Newton, who's Samuel's son and Jane's granddad. So Tatiana, what was it like photographing Blight's? Oh, you didn't photograph Blight's. Aaron did.
That's right.
So that's one of the pre-Tatiana photos. This is Coco and Lucy, two of the beloved shop dogs. And this is what you also don't get in many other shops these days. This is Coco and Lucy, the beloved Blight's shop dogs. So Aaron, this is one of your early ones too, wasn't it, Blight's?
Yeah, it was just one where I was sort of walking down the street, so it wasn't based on a recommendation. It just looked like this, amazing sort of immaculate sort of shop front, I guess. And you could, and it was just something where it was the first shoe repair as well that I'd sort of interviewed. Now I've done quite a few, but just seeing all the machinery in the background, and just, it's not just repairing shoes, it's, they're sharpening knives and cutting keys, and there are just a million different things that you sort of have to have, I guess, a level of expertise in, and, just, it was just really remarkable and really interesting. And that's
I think that shop counter that was in that early historical photo is actually still in use at, there we go, still in use at the shop today. So that's remarkable.
I remember they had the markings on I think it was on the wall, with how high their shoes, their stack of shoes that they were repairing were, and it just went right up to the wall.
Amazing. It's been in the family for that long. It's incredible. We're nearly running out of time. I just wanted to briefly, talk about some of, the historical influences that have disrupted the brick and mortar retailers. So the emergence of the main supermarket chains, online shopping, and now COVID. So it's sort of disrupted those physical places, streets and public places where we met, socialised, shopped. It's been curtailed for the time being. Do you think that the local brick and mortar store will survive this latest disruption? Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard for me to say or predict anything at the moment.
Yeah.
I just saw there's a coffee roaster that just opened there, around sort of near me, and they're now selling things in vending machines, which is like a depersonalization of, you know, the shopping experience. But I think, you know, so much of it, I think maybe particularly more during the first lockdown period, is so much of it has gone the other way, where people see that, you know, there's so much more, again, I think I mentioned, but like there's so much more than just, you know, someone selling a product and you buying a product. These, you know, they're like hubs for the community. They've shaped the architecture of the street, and you know, so many people rely on these shops, and they've, you know, gotten to know the people behind them, and they've got, you know, and I think that I think people are now decide, you know, there has for so many people been that decision of, you know, making an active decision to sort of support some of these shops during this period because of, you know, also the product they're selling and, you know, the skills that they possess, but because of the people behind them, and I guess some social obligation to sort of help, you know, help them through this period. And I think there was, I guess, one of the interviews, which has part of that interview that sort of stayed with me was I interviewed a hardware shop, and they were saying that, you know, it's not so much that Bunnings has, you know, cheap, better prices or better products. It's just that that's the first thing they think of when they, you know, need a tool. They'll go to Bunnings. So I guess part of it is just that sort of, you know, that active decision to say, I'm going to go to the shop down the road rather than the big chain that sort of advertised a lot. And
it's interesting, I guess, in this period where through both desire but also necessity, we're in a 5K ring at the moment. People are there's been this resurgence of this local, and everyone's very hyper focused on the local. And I guess we hope that continues beyond this, as you say, to keep these traders open and alive. We might actually open up the chat now. I've got a couple of things coming through. From Mend It Australia, you'll have to come out west and capture repair shops before these shops close. Have you done much out west, Aaron? Maybe that's your next.
Yeah, not so much. I mean, part of, so I moved to the other side, I moved to sort of Brunswick. So Tatiana and I used to live in the same sort of neck of the woods, I guess. But now we've sort of had to find, you know, places, you know, one week I'll go, you know, towards her, and other weeks she'll go towards me. So I don't think we've done so much out west. I mean, Tatiana, have we? I'm not.
I think we have been trying for the last few stories to go more your side, I think, to mix it up a little bit. But the idea is really to reach everywhere. I think we are not really focusing in one area. I think it's more the idea to really show what we have in Melbourne.
And Aaron, have you thought about interviewing people whose shops no longer exist, so that have already closed, not just about to close, but have already closed, may have left the vocation or shopkeeping a few decades ago, but were on shopping strips in Glen Ira?
Yeah, it's something I'd love to do. I think the challenge is, I guess, photographing it all, I suppose, because, you know, you don't have that shop front. But yeah, it's definitely something that I'd love to do, something that I've been thinking about, just figuring out how to do it. I mean, part of it, I guess, that so much of it is just me following recommendations, I think. So if anybody has recommendations, I mean, I guess now it's difficult because, you know, there's the safety protocols and things. So we haven't written a story or, you know, photographed a story for a while now. But yeah, if anybody has any recommendations for shops that have closed, I mean, I'm not sure what you think, Tatiana, but definitely something that I'd be keen to do.
Yeah, I'm sure that they'd get them, you can send them through to the chat, or also contact Aaron. His email address is on the Tales of Bricks and Mortar website. So if you've got any suggestions, please send them through to there. Have you thought of doing short videos to accompany your stories? You sort of have done that, Tatiana?
Yeah, I have done very short videos, but I think we thought about, but the whole structure and the format that we have, I think would just take too long. If I'm videoing, I cannot do the images that I want. because I would just be, my focus would be on the video and the audio and all these things and the lighting. It would have to be specific for video. So what I do really is like a documentary story, photography documentary.
Yeah.
So I think when I think it has a space for it, I'm definitely gonna try to add some video. But I think the main format is still photography. Yeah.
This is from Digib Oz. Relevance and criticality of local shops and local shopkeepers who are part of local community are becoming so much more significant, what we were talking about before. Again, right now in a COVID environment, let's keep them going. So that's just a little shout out about the importance of our local traders. Oh, there's a little bit of a joke here. I think this is a joke. AP Hanley, I think Ara was the sole trader in the area. Love it. Thank you for that. Okay. The video store on Murrumbina Road was closed and the building sold only this year. I think I remember the one on Murrumbina Road, actually. I remember the one on Poth Road, Hughesdale. Amanda, really interesting to hear this after reading these great stories on the Bricks and Mortar site. Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Amanda. Mended Australia, again, loved Ara's sewing machine. We want one. Wonderful. What else do we have here? Whatever happened to the local lovely handyman storekeeper that was on Kunang Road up to about 4 to 5 years ago? He was so helpful. If anyone knows the answer to that question, please pop it in the chat. Vinyl record stores. That could be something. Are there still many vinyl record stores around?
I think so. I did a couple, I think before I started working with Tatiana. So we did on Greville Street and also Dixon Recycled Records. I think that's what it's called. So, but that definitely during the early stages. I think they're still, pretty popular. I mean, it's so tricky now because,
So tricky. They're all, all going. A comment from Rosalind Gold here. Camden Picture Theatre, Hawthorne Road, Caulfield South, now a bowls club. Did anyone go to the Camden? She's popping it out there on the chat for everyone to answer. The Haddams in Hampton. Is that still there? The Haddams in Hampton? I don't know. There was another branch of another Haddam shop in Hampton, I believe. What else do we have here? Are you getting funding for Tales of Bricks and Mortar?
We've worked on, so I think Tatiana and I have worked on projects, like different sort of council projects outside of Tales of Brick and Mortar, but not for Tales of Brick and Mortar directly. Yeah.
What other projects have you been doing with other LGAs? You worked with Darabin, I believe.
So I think we're starting that project when I think it's sort of safe to do so. And then also with the Dandenong Council a while back and the Mini Valley Council, I think.
Wonderful.
Right, Tatiana? Yeah, I think so.
A comment here from V. I miss the old long gone stores like haberdashery shops, hardwares and milk bars. We talked about milk bars in our last live Sunday session. Any milk bars in the works, Aaron, maybe?
I'd love to. I don't think, I think Divine Deli is probably the closest one, which isn't necessarily, I don't know if that counts as I don't know what the strict definition of a milk bar is, but that's a deli, I guess. But yeah, there's definitely no like shop that I would like exclude by virtue of the fact that it's that thing, I guess.
Well, I think you'll get a lot of recommendations coming through on your email.
Great, no, perfect. That would be great.
We're going to have to wrap up, I think, unfortunately. If there's no more comments coming through. Any long-term electronics repair shops. So again, send those through to Aaron if you've got any ideas for electronic repair shops, which are probably also on their way out as well, with everyone just replacing everything as it breaks down. So just to wrap up, I think what I'm sort of getting from this conversation is this is really about people and stories and history and community, and the website that you're putting together, and that's an evolving project, is such a beautiful archive of stories and histories and trade and shopkeeping in Melbourne. And I'm so happy that Glen Ira features so heavily in it. And And I think these stories broadly, they help strengthen community identity. These are our stories as well. And I think that what so often happens is we love that these stores are there. We don't want them to go anywhere. But then sometimes it's a little bit more convenient to go to the major supermarket or the major convenience store. So let's shop local. Let's support our traders, particularly in this time. If your local restaurant is delivering, if your local homeware shop is open online, then support them and throw your support behind these traders, and let's get them through this time. So if you want to visit talesofbricksandmortar.com, that's where you can visit all the beautiful stories that are on the website. And I think, Aaron, you've also got a Facebook page.
Yeah, so on Facebook and Instagram. So yeah, check them out there. Yeah, all with amazing photos from Tatiana as well.
Wonderful. And Tatiana, you've also got your own website as well?
Yeah, I'm a commercial photographer, so freelance. And yeah, I have my own website.
Wonderful.
From Aaron, yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that you two came together in this beautiful creative partnership and are capturing these stories as unfortunately some of these shops are closing down. So I really do appreciate your time today. And thank you everyone for joining us. Next Sunday at 20th of August at 3 p.m. We have Visit the Underworld World with Dream Puppets, Close Your Curtains and Surrender to Dream to Vividly Experience Dreamer in the Deep by Dream Puppets. For further info about that and all the other programs and online events we're running at Glen Ira, you can follow Glen Ira Arts and Culture on Facebook, or head to the Glen Ira website and search for GE Arts online. Thank you to everyone involved today. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Tatiana. Everyone behind the scenes. It's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.